Officer, could you clarify what violation this concerns?
Give me your ID, now. Don't make me ask again.
Officer, there must be a misunderstanding. I'm an active duty military.
Now, you're being evasive, mister. Enough, stop wasting my time. I'm confused. What's your legal basis for this?
Shut up! Hands behind your back before this gets worse for you. This wouldn't happen if you just comply.
This is a mistake, officer.
Stop resisting!
I said stop resisting!
I'm not resisting. I'm a U.S. Navy commander.
No, I don't care. You're not cooperating with the investigation.
I'm cooperating, officer.
Agent Jules Caldwell had 7 detentions left to meet his monthly quota when he spotted Commander Carl Holton in the Westfield Mall food court. What followed? The takedown. The 7 minutes with his knee buried in a decorated officer's spine, the 30 phones recording every second, would cost Caldwell 14 years of his freedom and transform him into a federal case study on what happens when quota pressure meets racial profiling. The ribbons scattered across the marble floor included a Purple Heart and Bronze Star from combat deployments Caldwell would never understand. Holton's voice never rose above conversational level, even with his face pressed against cold stone. His service number, calmly recited while being brutalized, would be entered into evidence 53 times during trial. Caldwell didn't realize he wasn't detaining a suspect. He was assaulting the sleeping giant that would dismantle his entire career and reshape ICE policy nationwide. The afternoon sun filtered through the skylights of Westfield Mall, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Commander Carl Holton stood near the food court fountain, checking his watch. 45 minutes until his daughter Maya finished her shift at the bookstore. He'd driven 3 hours straight from the Pentagon, still wearing his Navy service dress uniform from that morning's Joint Chiefs briefing. The uniform drew occasional glances, respectful nods from veterans, curious looks from shoppers. The gold stripes on his sleeves marked him as an 05, a commander who'd spent 15 years earning each ribbon on his chest. The Purple Heart from his Persian Gulf deployment, the Bronze Star from a classified operation he still couldn't discuss, the Navy Commendation Medal with Combat 5 that represented a night he'd rather forget. Holton was the Deputy Director of Naval Operations, a position that granted him access to information most members of Congress would never see. He briefed admirals and generals daily. He held a top-secret SCI security clearance. But right now, he was just a father waiting to surprise his daughter before finals week. Across the food court, ICE agent Jules Caldwell was having a different kind of afternoon. 7 detentions short of his monthly quota. 3 days left in the month. His supervisor's voice echoed in his head from that morning's meeting. The budget review is coming. We need to justify our numbers. Everyone needs to pull their weight. Caldwell scanned the crowd with practiced assessment. Demographics, body language, vulnerability. It was a calculus he'd perfected over 8 years. Who would comply quickly, who wouldn't have resources to fight back, who could be processed and released after the paperwork hit his quota. Then he spotted Holton. Black male, mid-30s, athletic build, standing alone. The expensive watch suggested disposable income. Maybe an undocumented worker who'd found success, the kind his supervisors loved to tout in reports. The calm demeanor suggested someone who wouldn't make a scene. The uniform didn't register as significant. Or perhaps it did, and Caldwell dismissed it as irrelevant to what he needed. He approached with the confidence of federal authority, his tactical vest with ICE emblazoned across it, catching the light. "Excuse me, I need to see your identification." Now. Holton turned slowly, his expression neutral but alert. He recognized the tone before he processed the words, the voice of someone who expected immediate compliance without question. "Is there a problem, officer?" Caldwell stepped closer, invading personal space in the way he'd been trained. Establish dominance, create pressure, force compliance. "I'm conducting an immigration compliance check. Identification." Don't make me ask again. Holton felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. The invisible tax that every black person in America pays, regardless of achievement or service. The asterisk that appears next to their credentials, their rank, their humanity. Sir, I'm a United States Navy commander. I'm here to pick up my daughter from work. What specific violation are you investigating? It was the wrong question to ask a desperate man. Caldwell's jaw tightened. The quota clock was ticking. This encounter was already taking too long. You're in violation of 8 U.S.C. 1404, failure to carry alien registration documents. Holton processed this immediately. 8 U.S.C. Section 1404 required non-citizens to carry alien registration documents. It had zero application to United States citizens. It certainly had no application to active-duty military officers with top-secret security clearances who'd spent 15 years serving their country. Caldwell wasn't investigating. He was manufacturing. I'm a United States citizen, Holton said, his voice steady and professional. Born in Cleveland, Ohio. That statute doesn't apply to me. That's what they all claim. Caldwell's hand moved to his belt, fingers drumming near his restraints. You're being evasive. That's probable cause for detention. Holton recognized the trap immediately. In Caldwell's framework, any response became suspicious. Compliance was admission of guilt. Resistance was guilt. Questions were guilt. The system was rigged from the first word, designed to create justification for whatever Caldwell had already decided to do. Around them, the lunch crowd was beginning to notice. A conversation that had started as routine was escalating into something else. Phones appeared in peripheral vision, not yet recording, but ready. Sir, I'm going to retrieve my military identification from my jacket pocket. I'm telling you this before I move so there's no misunderstanding. Keep your hands where I can see them. Holton moved with deliberate slowness, each gesture visible and non-threatening. His hand slipped inside his jacket and emerged with the Common Access Card, the Department of Defense's standard-issue credential. Embedded chip technology, biometric data, photo identification with his rank clearly displayed, CDR Holton, Carl J., USN. He held it at eye level, allowing Caldwell to read every detail. Caldwell barely glanced at it. He snatched the card, gave it a cursory look, then tossed it back dismissively. This doesn't prove citizenship. I'm detaining you for further verification. Holton caught the ID card before it hit the ground, his military reflexes automatic. Something shifted in his assessment of the situation. This wasn't about immigration enforcement. This wasn't even about reasonable suspicion. This was transactional. Something desperate in Caldwell's approach that had nothing to do with law and everything to do with numbers. Agent Caldwell, Holton said, reading the nameplate on the tactical vest. His voice remained calm, but carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. You have no legal authority to detain a United States citizen without probable cause of an immigration violation. I'm an active-duty military. I've provided federal identification. What specific articulable facts support your detention? The question was surgical. It demanded the kind of specificity that transforms encounters from confrontations into legal proceedings. It required Caldwell to articulate reasonable suspicion based on objective facts rather than assumptions. It was the question any competent attorney would ask, the question any federal judge would demand, answered. It was also the question that exposed everything. Caldwell's face flushed. His hand moved from his belt to his radio, then back to his belt. Uncertain movements that betrayed his lack of preparation for resistance. In 8 years of ICE work, most of his encounters had followed a simple pattern. Demand compliance, receive compliance. Process accordingly. He'd learned to identify people who wouldn't fight back, who couldn't afford lawyers, who feared authority more than they valued their rights. Holton was different. Holton was calm. Holton was asking questions that required answers Caldwell couldn't provide. "You're refusing to cooperate with a federal investigation," Caldwell said, his voice rising. The lunch crowd was definitely watching now. Phones were emerging from pockets. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "I'm not refusing cooperation," Holton began, his tone still measured and professional. "I'm asking you to articulate your legal basis for—" Caldwell didn't wait for him to finish. The decision was instantaneous, driven by a toxic mixture of wounded pride, desperation, and the racial assumptions that had guided Caldwell's entire career. This black man was questioning him, in public, with witnesses, making him look foolish, making him look weak. That couldn't stand. Caldwell's training kicked in, not the training about de-escalation or civil rights or constitutional limitations. The other training, the muscle memory of takedowns and control holds, the instinct to dominate rather than dialogue. His hand shot out, grabbing Holton's shoulder with practiced force. The confrontation was about to become an assault. The takedown was textbook, if the textbook was written for maximum violence rather than minimum force. Caldwell grabbed Holton's shoulder, twisted it with his full body weight, and swept his legs in a single fluid motion designed to incapacitate and humiliate. Holton, trained in close quarters defensive tactics from his Naval Academy days and refreshed annually through military requirements, shifted his weight instinctively. Not to attack, not even to resist. Simply to protect himself from the incoming force, the way any trained person would react to sudden violence. Caldwell interpreted or claimed to interpret any movement as resistance. The marble floor rushed up impossibly fast. Holton's face struck the polished stone with a crack that echoed through the food court like a gunshot. His shoulder, caught at an unnatural angle by Caldwell's twisting grip, dislocated on impact. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, white-hot lightning shooting from his shoulder to his spine. His service ribbons, carefully pinned to his uniform that morning, scattered across the floor. The Purple Heart skittered under a table. The Bronze Star slid toward a trash can. The Navy Commendation Medal with Combat Fee, earned during a firefight off the coast of Yemen, came to rest near someone's dropped shopping bag. 15 years of service, spread across a mall floor like garbage. Caldwell drove his knee into Holton's spine with his full 240 pounds. The pressure was crushing, designed to immobilize and control. Holton's face pressed against the cold marble, his vision swimming with pain and the surreal recognition of where he was, on the ground, in uniform, in America. "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" But Holton wasn't resisting. His hands were spread wide, palms flat against the floor, in the universal gesture of surrender. His voice, when he managed to speak through the pressure on his spine, remained steady despite the agony radiating through his body. "I am not resisting. I am Commander Carl Holton, United States Navy, service number 672-29584. I am requesting immediate contact with the Pentagon Office of General Counsel." 7 minutes. Caldwell kept him pinned for 7 minutes. Around them, 30 witnesses had their phones out now. 30 cameras recording from 30 angles. 30 time-stamped pieces of evidence documenting every second of a federal agent assaulting a decorated military officer to meet a quota. History was being made, one video at a time. Rebecca Torres had been reaching for a pretzel when she heard the crack. 20 years as an investigative journalist for the Washington Post had trained her to recognize the sound of violence, and, more importantly, to recognize when violence was wrong. She turned to see a black man in a Navy uniform face down on the marble floor, an ICE agent's knee buried in his spine. The man's hands were clearly visible, palms open. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't fleeing. He was being restrained with a level of force that made no tactical sense unless the goal was punishment rather than control. Torres was already recording before conscious thought caught up with instinct. But she was also taking notes in her mind, the way she'd learned covering conflicts in 3 countries. Badge number visible on the tactical vest, timestamp from the mall's digital displays, absence of any backup or supervision, the scattered military ribbons telling their own story. She knew immigration law. She'd spent 2 years investigating ICE detention practices for a series that earned her a Pulitzer nomination. ICE agents had no general law enforcement authority. They couldn't detain United States citizens without probable cause of immigration violations. They certainly couldn't assault active-duty military officers engaged in lawful activity in a shopping mall. This wasn't law enforcement. This was something else entirely. Mall security arrived. 3 officers in their mid-20s who looked terrified of the federal agent, but disturbed by what they were witnessing. They hung back, uncertain whether interfering with federal law enforcement would cost them their jobs. The paralysis of authority, Torres thought. The assumption that the badge makes it right. She kept recording. Other phones were out now, too. A teenage couple, an elderly woman, a man in a business suit, a group of college students. 30 witnesses creating 30 permanent records. Then Torres saw the girl. 16, maybe 17, emerging from a bookstore with a Barnes & Noble name tag still clipped to her shirt. The girl's face transformed from confusion to horror to something else. Focus. Instead of screaming or running, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands and made a call. Not to 911, to someone else. Torres recognized that look. She'd seen it before in conflict zones, in moments of crisis. The look of someone who knew exactly who to call, who had been trained for emergencies, who had a network that would respond. The girl was the officer's daughter, and she was activating something powerful. Captain Jennifer Ashford was reviewing court-martial briefs in her Pentagon office when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer. Unknown calls during work hours were usually spam. But something made her pick up. Captain Ashford, Navy JAG Corps. Captain, this is Maya Holton. My dad told me to call this number if there was ever an emergency. Someone's hurting him. An ICE agent. At Westfield Mall. He's on the ground, and he keeps saying he's not resisting, but... Ashford was already moving, her legal mind processing faster than her feet. Commander Carl Holton, Deputy Director of Naval Operations, one of the Pentagon's rising stars, on the ground at a mall. ICE agent, assault on a federal officer. Maya, I need you to stay on the line. Keep recording if you can. I'm making calls right now. 6 minutes later, Ashford had the ICE field office director on the phone, her voice carrying the weight of institutional fury. This is Captain Ashford, Navy JAG Corps. One of your agents is currently assaulting a Navy commander in uniform at Westfield Mall. You have 6 minutes to get supervisory personnel on scene before I elevate this to the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. The field office director's voice went from annoyed to alarmed in the space of a heartbeat. Assaulting a... Wait, what? Commander Carl Holton, Pentagon staff. Your agent has him face down on a mall floor. It's being recorded by multiple witnesses. I suggest you move quickly. 10 minutes after Maya's call, a 2-star admiral at the Pentagon was on the phone with the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. The conversation was brief, pointed, and left no room for interpretation. One of our officers is under assault by one of your agents. Fix it. Now. The Pentagon doesn't abandon its officers. Not in war zones. Not in hostile ports. and certainly not in American shopping malls. By minute 12, Caldwell's supervisor was calling his cell phone repeatedly, each call more frantic than the last. By minute 15, the ICE field office director was personally en route, his security detail breaking traffic laws to get there. By minute 18, Caldwell finally looked at his phone and saw 17 missed calls from his chain of command. His 7 detentions suddenly weren't worth what was unfolding. He released Holton. Holton stood slowly, every movement deliberate and controlled, despite the agony screaming through his dislocated shoulder. His arm hung at an unnatural angle, the joint visibly displaced beneath his uniform. Paramedics were approaching with a gurney, but he waved them off with his functioning hand. There was something he needed to do first. He bent down, ignoring the protests from his body, and began collecting his service ribbons from the mall floor. One by one. The Purple Heart from under the table, the Bronze Star near the trash can, the Navy Commendation Medal by the shopping bag, each one retrieved with the same methodical precision he'd used to earn them. And with each ribbon, he maintained eye contact with Caldwell. The entire food court had gone silent. The 30 witnesses with their 30 phones understood they were watching something significant. Not just the aftermath of violence, but a statement being made without words. Dignity being reclaimed one small piece at a time. When Holton had collected the last ribbon, he straightened as much as his injured shoulder allowed. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but carried to every corner of the space. "Agent Caldwell." He read the nameplate again, making sure everyone heard the name clearly. "I need you to understand something. This wasn't about immigration enforcement. This was about you needing numbers. You saw a black man, and you calculated that I'd be easy, that I wouldn't have resources, that I wouldn't fight back." Caldwell's face had drained of all color. Holton was articulating exactly what had happened. The quiet mathematics of racial profiling dressed up as law enforcement. The desperation of quotas turning human beings into statistics. "You were wrong," Holton continued. "And now you're going to face the consequences of turning human beings into statistics." The ICE field office director arrived at that moment, taking in the scene with the horror of someone who understood exactly how catastrophic this was going to be. Rebecca Torres stepped forward, identifying herself as Washington Post, requesting an interview. Holton agreed with a small nod. The paramedics finally reached him, and he allowed them to begin their assessment. His shoulder would require surgery, but the real damage had already been done. Not to him, but to the system that had enabled this moment. The viral documentation was already beginning. Witnesses uploaded footage with shaking hands. Torres filed her initial report, and the Pentagon's legal machinery activated with the precision of a carrier strike group. Justice was coming. The Pentagon's Office of Inspector General launched their investigation within hours of the incident. By the following morning, Navy JAG had filed criminal complaints with both federal and state prosecutors. The Department of Homeland Security's Office of Professional Responsibility opened parallel investigations, more concerned with damage control than justice. ICE's Internal Affairs Division began the uncomfortable work of auditing Agent Jules Caldwell's entire career. What they found was damning beyond anyone's expectations. 47 detentions in 3 months. 31 had resulted in immediate release, with no charges filed. The pattern was unmistakable. Caldwell targeted minorities in affluent areas, detained them long enough to hit his paperwork quota, then released them before anyone could file complaints or demand justification. His performance reviews praised his exceptional productivity and commitment to enforcement priorities. Not once had any supervisor questioned his methods. Not once had anyone asked why his detention-to-deportation ratio was so dramatically different from other agents. The quota system had incentivized arrests over accuracy, quantity over justice. Rebecca Torres's article appeared in the Washington Post days after the incident. The Quota System: How ICE Agents' Numbers Game Became Assault on Decorated Officer. She'd obtained Caldwell's internal metrics, interviewed 12 people he'd previously detained, and connected the dots between institutional pressure and individual violence. The video footage went viral. Millions of views in days. Congressional hearings were scheduled within a week. Veterans organizations mobilized with coordinated fury. The hashtag Quotas Over Justice trended for weeks. The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks, though the outcome was never in doubt. The prosecution presented body camera footage from mall security, 30 witness videos from multiple angles, medical records documenting Holton's injuries, and Caldwell's own detention reports showing falsified probable cause. Defense attorneys tried to argue Caldwell had acted in good faith based on his training. The prosecution demolished this by presenting evidence of Caldwell's quota-driven pattern and his deliberate targeting of minorities who appeared financially stable but were assumed to be vulnerable. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: assault on a federal officer under 18 U.S.C. Section 111, deprivation of civil rights under color of law under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, false imprisonment under state charges, and falsification of federal documents. The sentencing hearing was packed with veterans organizations, civil rights advocates, and journalists. Holton attended in his dress uniform, his shoulder still in a brace from the second surgery. Maya sat beside him, her law school acceptance letter in her bag. Georgetown, full scholarship, civil rights concentration. The judge's statement was delivered with barely controlled anger. "Agent Caldwell, you transformed a human being into a statistic to advance your career. You saw a decorated military officer and calculated his value based solely on the color of his skin. You assaulted a man who has given more to this country than you ever will. You represent everything law enforcement should not be. You are sentenced to 14 years in federal prison." The civil judgment came shortly after. $4.7 million settlement paid by the Department of Homeland Security to Commander Holton, the largest individual payout in an ICE misconduct case. An additional $2.3 million was distributed to 12 other individuals who had been unlawfully detained by Caldwell in similar quota-driven encounters. But the systemic changes were what mattered most. ICE eliminated numerical detention quotas nationwide, the policy shift Holton had insisted upon as part of his settlement. Mandatory body cameras for all field agents became standard within 6 months. A new Civil Rights Compliance Office with external oversight was established. Most significantly, the Caldwell Protocols became mandatory training scenarios on what constitutes unlawful profiling and the consequences of quota-driven enforcement. Months later, Commander Carl Holton was promoted to captain. He now serves as the Navy's Deputy Chief of Personnel, overseeing equal opportunity programs and military justice reform. He speaks regularly at service academies about integrity, civil rights, and the true meaning of service. His shoulder required 2 surgeries, but he maintained full active duty status. Maya Holton graduated from Georgetown Law and immediately joined the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project, directly challenging the systems that had enabled her father's assault. Jules Caldwell serves his sentence at Federal Correctional Institution Ashland in Kentucky. His appeals have been exhausted. His pension was revoked. His family issued a public statement distancing themselves from his actions. He's become a cautionary tale in federal law enforcement training. The agent who confused productivity with justice, who saw human beings as numbers, who let desperation and prejudice destroy everything. Westfield Mall installed a memorial plaque near the fountain, in honor of those who serve with dignity and in recognition that justice must never be sacrificed for convenience.